It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a new guest to the podcast, Kev Harrison. Welcome to the show.
Hello there, Tim. Thanks very much for having me on. My name's Kev Harrison. I'm a writer of horror and dark fiction, and my most recent release is a book of Subterranean Horror called Below, which is out through Bridget's Press.
Okay, Subterranean. Now I wish I'd read the press release like I was supposed to. So, Subterranean Horror. That sounds fascinating. Tell us what. So these stories all set underground. What makes it subterranean?
Well, yeah, basically, I mean, it's a novella, and the premise of the novella is that there's a guy who's British, and his grandfather was buried alive in a mining accident in the US at the very end of the gold rush. And he gets the opportunity to go there and do like a TV bit, basically filming a documentary as they dig up the mine and kind of tell the story of his grandpa, the hero who helped to get some other people out of the mine. But when he gets there, there's something in the mine.
Because of course there is, yes.
Exactly. Wouldn't be much of a story without it.
Well, you know, I mean, it actually sounded like a pretty good story even without that part, honestly. I mean, I was just imagining, like, yeah, that's a pretty dramatic story even without the monster or whatever it is down there.
Yeah, for sure. And like the way I kind of envisaged the story and the way it kind of eventually worked out was that basically you get kind of the story of what happened originally, like sort of 60 years ago or 50 years ago, whatever it is, told through like some journal entries that they find as they're sort of exploring this mine with the camera team. So yeah, you kind of get these the scribbled notes of this grandfather, which get more and more sort of messed up as he kind of goes a little crazy, as you would if you're basically left to die and starve to death in a mine shaft.
Yeah, it sounds like you got a little bit of that cosmic horror kind of twist to it too, in a way. You know, the Lovecraftian is what we call it here in the States, at least. I don't know. I think that's pretty worldwide now, but you know, the mostly with the madness, you know, the creeping dread that comes with losing your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. There is that kind of, and I deliberately wanted to leave that kind of ambiguity about that. Like, you know, when he's losing the plot, like, is that something where he is losing his mind, or is other things that he's seeing and experiencing real things? I don't want to go too far into spoiler territory, but yeah, that's kind of the vibe.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of that video game series Amnesia. Have you ever heard of Amnesia?
I've heard of it, but I haven't played it. Actually.
Okay, so the first game was The Dark Descent. At first I thought it was going to be a walking simulator. That's kind of what I was hoping it was. It's way more challenging than that. At least the first game is. But it's a horror game. I mean, the first game, The Dark Descent, you wake up in a castle and you don't know who you are. You know, kind of a classic video game setup. But it's dark, nice. And whenever the dark closes in around you, you've like, you know, keep your candles lit and stuff. So you're trying to survive because there's things in the dark that will get you. Okay. Sweet. And the actual presentation of the game changes based on your sanity meter and stuff like that. So it gets crazy. I actually haven't beaten it. I've only played it a little bit because frankly it was too much for me. And first-person games where the camera sways that much are also a problem for me. I get a little sick. But
yeah, I get lost all the time in first-person games. I'm useless at those.
Yes. I used to only play first-person, but never mind. We're not here to talk about video games. As much fun as they are.
Indeed.
So, do you mostly write horror then? I mean, you said you that's mostly where you come from as far as your genre. Is that going to be, I mean, have you written other stuff, or is that your sole focus, more or less, with fiction?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've very much focused on sort of the darker side of things, and I found that I've tried to write stuff which is more, you know, maybe uplifting or maybe like mainstream, and invariably my brain just goes, no, let's go dark side. So it just doesn't work out. But I do have, I mean, I've actually literally this week just signed a contract on my first novel, which is also with Bridget's Gate, and that is kind of a horror, but it's kind of an adventure horror because it takes place in the Middle East, and it's got lots of kind of mystery elements and like people trying to figure things out. So yeah, that's kind of
interesting.
It's very much kind of like people trying to find out what's going on, and like sort of lots of dashing from one place to another. And
are we thinking kind of like a mummy, like the Mummy, that kind of thing, like the film? So, I mean, you say Middle East. That's kind of that's adjacent. That's Egypt, but still, I'm thinking like
for sure,
or like Indiana Jones Egypt adjacent, but more but scarier. You know?
Yeah, totally, and I've definitely gone for less of a camp vibe than you get in a Mummy. I love the Mummy, but it is
of course, I assume so. I was just kind of using it as a gauge for the adventure side of things. Yeah.
Totally. But yeah, definitely that vibe of like sort of fast-paced, lots of stuff going on, having to figure out like how to stop a great darkness kind of thing. So yeah, that's the next thing that's going to be coming out in 2024.
Well, congrats on signing that deal then. That's awesome. Hey, so have you written the novel already, or are you still writing it?
Yeah, that's written. I actually finished writing that the beginning of this year. Yeah, the beginning of this year, late last year. And then it's that long process, of sending it to publishers, getting people to look at it, and you know how that is, right? Like it's.
I knew it at one point. I've more or less forgotten.
It's not a bad thing to have forgotten, to be honest. It's probably the worst part of the process, like the waiting, the never-ending waiting.
Yeah. I considered submitting to some small presses more recently anyway, not all that, like last year. I was considering submitting some books to small presses or whatever, but nah, I just can't. I just got to do it all myself now. That's how I roll. Indie publishing.
Well, I put out a short story collection myself, with some help from a friend of mine who's sort of just running like a label. He's not really running it as a press, but he's kind of using a label to kind of give that impression of quality and of like that sort of thing. A guy called Dan Howarth, who's also a horror writer, and that was an interesting experience because I do love having the control over what you're putting out and the control over I want to put this on the promotion this week to try and sell a few more books or whatever. For example, Halloween is a great example of that. So it was an interesting process, but the problem always with self-publishing is like taking that punt on the cost of getting a cover produced and getting the editing done and this kind of thing. Whereas obviously the small press saddles all those costs if you do manage to find home for your book in a more traditional way.
And editing is the most expensive one. It's also the hardest to do yourself.
Yeah,
you can't really replace an editor. You can't be your own editor the way you can be your own cover artist if you learn how to make covers like I have. But you can't. I mean, you can't. But I mean, like even if I can edit other people's work, I couldn't edit my own that way.
Exactly, you're too close to it, right? Like you're just too close.
I mean, I do all the self-editing and stuff. Yeah. And then the production, a lot of it is assisted by things like automated grammar checkers, which are way more than grammar checkers at this point. But automated editing software helps out a lot. But at some point, you got to have somebody else look at it. And
absolutely,
there's just no substitute. Yeah.
No, 100%. So yeah, so not having those costs is really, really beneficial. And also, like I think, Bridget's Gate are quite new on the scene, but like what they've done with my with the novella below was really, I've really been impressed with it. They've done a lot of good marketing. Cover art's fantastic.
Yeah, indeed.
They've got like announcements in a lot of places. So yeah, I feel very content. I feel like it's going to be a good home for Shadow of the Hidden, which is coming out in 2024 March, I believe.
Yeah, I mean that's great. I mean, though obviously the waiting is serious, like on both counts. Like 2024, that's a ways out, man. That's. I'm not to try to rub things in. I'm obviously, but I guess 2023 is just around the corner. But yeah, hey,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I barely wrote anything this year, which is kind of my challenge right now. So, what am I talking about?
That's the thing, isn't it? I also found this process, especially like after the pandemic and things. Lots of my day job. I'm a teacher for a living as day job, and that very much changed during dynamic wise during COVID. And I've actually had really big problems with getting a writing routine going. I've actually got back into it in the last few weeks, which has been a real positive. But for about 18 months, 2 years, it was really slow going and very difficult at times because my job was all over the show, and it really made a huge impact on my writing habits and so on.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've actually been typing a bit. Like I've been typing stories and stuff, but I need to dictate or I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm just such a slow typist, and I haven't made time. And I've been rough on the dictation for quite a while. I say I can't get anywhere with typing. I did type for most of my career at this point, but I'm so much faster at dictating. I really want to keep doing it, and yet as soon as I switched back, it's like, well, now I'm not going to do anything. It's kind of the vibe for a few months there. It's like, okay, I'm going to switch from typing to nothing.
Do you use speech to text when you do the dictation? How does that work?
I dictate into a voice recorder, and then I have the MP3 transcribed by a piece of software called Dragon.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's really nice. It doesn't work perfectly, obviously. It's rough, and I write fantasy, so there's a lot of words that I need to teach it, or it just gets them wrong every time. But and then it's like, oh, that was not 2 words. No, that was 1 word. Dragon. Okay, good. But it's pretty easy to teach the software how to do that, how to read the words properly. The issue I have sometimes is that they're almost always names, and sometimes I would come up with a name, like when I'm typing, I can just come up with a name and no problem, right? I just come up with a new fantasy name in the middle of the story because there's a new character has appeared. But when I'm typing, when I'm dictating, that's almost impossible because I won't remember by the time the session's over that the character had it, that this new name had been in there, and so when I'm looking at the dictation, the transcription, it will be misspelled or will
like
come out as 2 actual words, that sound similar to it, and it's hard to. It's an interesting process. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, sure.
But it did change my process a little bit, that's for sure. But again, 6,000 words an hour instead of 2,000. And the 2,000 is like a good hour for me, where 6,000 is a low hour for dictation for me. So,
yeah, I mean, I tend to get like if I do like an hour session, I'll normally get about 1,000 words, 1,200 words, something like that.
That's a reasonable amount. Fine. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's okay.
That's great. I mean, I mean, for most of my career, most of my typing, I was doing 1,000 or 1,200, and then eventually I got up to like 1,800 pretty regularly. But
that's solid.
I consider that to be a little slow for what I need to do, though.
Okay.
Especially because I had carpal tunnel for a while there. No. My books aren't that long. My books aren't that long, but I need to write a lot of them. It's more the indie thing than the fantasy thing at this point.
Okay.
Because I was actually just telling people at my job today, my day job, my other job, that if you gotta put out books or you're not going to get noticed as an indie. That's the biggest challenge, if you ask me. I mean,
that's the thing for me as well, because I had my first novella came out in 2020. Yeah, 2020. And it was literally like 2 weeks before the pandemic kind of like locked down the earth.
Bad timing.
Yeah, really bad. And then, but that did pretty well. Like it took a little while to kind of gather steam, but it did pretty well. And then I had a few like sort of chapter books kind of come out through like domain publishing, which are like sort of individual stories, like novelette kind of length.
Right.
And they were reasonably well received as well. Then my short story collection. Then Below. The most recent novella, and then now I have nothing till March 2024. So I'm just like,
that's a big wait, yeah.
It is, yeah.
For your readers more than you. I mean, you can keep telling your own stories, but they can't get those until you. Well, I mean, unless you chose to publish something indie, and maybe you can't even do that. I don't know what your contract's like. What is your contract? If you don't mind me asking.
I can do it. I've got freedom to do other stuff, and I've also got another contract with the publisher who did my first novella, Lichen Valley Press, to do 4 folk horror novellas, because that first one was folk horror. And so the first one of those is due with them in February. So I'm really crossing my fingers that maybe they'll be able to turn it around by the end of next year sometime. So sort of towards the end of 2023, they'll get something out.
I mean, and novella, hopefully they'll be able to get the editing done faster, yeah.
That's it, exactly.
You'd think, but that often isn't the issue. It's a publishing schedule, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They got other stuff coming down the pipeline as well. Yeah, absolutely. But I've also got a project which actually might interest you, being a metalhead, because me and the guy I mentioned earlier, Dan Howarth, and 2 other writers that we're sort of working with, we're planning to do a collection of 4 novellas with the title Haunts, so just a haunting story. And mine is actually basically finished as a first draft, and it's about a black metal band that go to a house that's famously haunted. It's like a famously haunted murder house in the countryside in the UK, and the vocalist, who's the POV character, is a complete psychopath, and his objective is like to harness the evil from this murder house and like put it on a record. So yeah, a lot of fun.
Oh, that sounds like an episode of Metalocalypse, but it would not be played. But it would be played for laughs in that show. Obviously, it would be like, now I've got to make the most evil band, the most evil album ever, or whatever.
I think it's difficult though to actually steer away from the laughs when like trying to keep a straight face when you know, like writing something about evil as a POV character. It's actually quite hard work.
No, I mean, I imagine it is. Like, I mean, so one of my favorite authors, I've probably mentioned this too many times in the show now, but Joe Abercrombie, he writes, you know, dark fantasy. Or what they call grimdark, and the version of grimdark he does is very funny, which is right. I mean, it's not like Game of Thrones, like this is gonna be serious. There's some jokes, but it's not that funny. And then there's the almost parodic version of horror of horrific dark fantasy, which is, you know, okay, this is brutal, but you can't help but poke fun at it because that's just how the world is.
That does sound like my kind of cup of tea. So yeah, I'll definitely have to check
I definitely recommend that. The First Law trilogy, amazing. Great place to start. The Blade itself is the first book.
I'm going to scribble that down. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Actually, do you have time to read books? Do you read other people's stuff?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I try to. I mean, like, I have a commute that I go with public transport every day because, well, when I go to work, it's about 3 days a week. So on those days, I'll try and read. And I normally, when I go to bed, I'll read a chapter or two, and then if I get a holiday, which happens now and then you know, I'll just lie by the pool and just like smash through books.
Oh, sweet!
Yeah.
Forget the water; just sit near the water and read.
Exactly. I got one of the new waterproof Kindles now, so like,
oh wow,
I'm unstoppable.
Yeah, lately most of my reading has happened in the car in the wee hours before work, because I go into work at like 3:30. Yeah, no, I have to get up a few, you know, like half an hour before that too. So it's pretty brutal. My schedule's nasty.
Jesus. That's time.
Because everything has to be done by 9:30. It's only a part-time job, but you have to do it all before the trucks leave. Anyway, so because you're loading trucks.
Ouch. Yeah.
Yeah, but I have a few minutes usually when I get to the parking lot. I'm just like, okay, I got my phone here. Let's do some reading. And lately, I've mostly been reading nonfiction. I'm reading some Dean Wesley Smith's, some of Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush. There are a couple, but it's hard for me to pronounce both their names. Apparently, they've got 3 names each. What is with these people? I guess my name's long enough for 3 names. But anyway, but very good stuff. They've got a couple of compilations of their business articles for writers. I'm reading. I think it was Productivity Tips for Writers. Was the one I'm reading now.
Yeah.
It's a series.
Really
It's like 4 books
useful.
loaded into one. Yeah. They're good, and these are both long-time professional writers. You know, Dean he's been traditionally published. I don't remember. Christine definitely as well, but she's been mostly published under pen names and stuff. I think. Don't quote me on that. But they both wrote under multiple pen names. They're like extremely prolific people as far as writing goes, and obviously getting on to go on.
Pen name side of things, because I've got about 2/3 of a novella or a novel. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work out. It's going to be around that kind of cusp period, about 40,000 words ish, probably.
Yeah.
And I started writing it a few years ago when I was before I was a teacher. I worked as an analyst, like a financial analyst.
Okay.
And it was bloody dreadful. So while I was there, I actually started writing a kind of like a guy accidentally murders one of the management team and then wonders if he can murder all of the management team.
Oh no!
So it's kind of like an Office sort of very, very, very black comedy.
And you're telling me.
It doesn't really fit with like what I write generally.
It sounds like
it has to be a pen name job.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, everybody I talk to says put it out under your own name, but hey, I write the most embarrassing things I can possibly think of. So, I mean, in my fantasy books, the most like, oh, this is probably not appropriate for anyone, but I'm going to put it in the book because whenever I don't do that, the book just flounders. At least if you read into any of the stuff in the books, anyway, it's gonna be like, okay, why are there so many tentacles in this book? Anyway, it's a fantasy book. It's not horror. What is going on here? Why do the monsters always have tentacles or extra arms
Why
or
not?
something?
Why not tentacles? I mean, tentacles are pretty bloody terrifying. I mean,
They
delicious
are.
as well,
They
but
are.
also terrifying.
But when you can, and then you can grow them out of any part of your body at will. That's pretty freaky too. So
Exactly.
that's one of my types of demon in the Demon Hunter series. Like one of the main types has this ability. They're kind of like incubi and succubi, but then they also have tentacles. It's not a. It's an odd combination. They have tentacles.
Nice.
They appear human, but they can grow additional parts and stuff. Weird.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they are, and actually, and they're not even. I don't even think they're full demons. No, they're not full demons. They're demon spawns. They're part human. Hence hence you can actually kill them, unlike most of the demons in that setting, which are completely immortal.
Like eternal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, that's my minor plug for the third book in that series, Well Country, which is definitely the weirdest so far.
Awesome.
But
What was it? Whale country.
Well Country, a well, as in
Whale country.
like the well
Like
you
a
draw
well
water
that you
from.
take water from.
Yeah,
Yeah. Gotcha.
But in this case, these wells don't. Water doesn't come out of the well. It goes all the way down into where the demons live. It's a pit that goes all the way down into where the demons live. And Well Country is a land where there's lots of these things. They're called world wells. Yeah. So
And you bring up demons in the well.
well, you can, but mostly you try to keep them from coming out of there. And so because you can't kill them, you have to throw them down the well to get rid of them.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Yeah, that's where that name comes from. And it's probably an awkward title, but it is the third book in the series. I really think it works. It's just
And it throws up some good opportunities for throwing things down wells. I mean, we need more of that in fiction and film.
Yeah, it's second only to defenestration in my favorite things that can happen in a book. No, really, it's not even second. It's first. It's first. Frankly, falling through an endless abyss into basically hell is pretty it's not a fun experience, obviously.
No.
So you might imagine when the demons eventually get back to the surface, they're pretty unhappy about it.
Awesome.
Anyway.
So you get some violent revenge. Yeah.
Definitely. Though sometimes it can take them a very long time to get back, obviously. They're climbing out of the center of the earth, basically.
That just makes the grudge even deeper, I suppose.
Yes. They're just, but I mean by a long time, it's like, if you're lucky, you'll die before the demon gets back to the surface.
Okay.
Old age will get you first. But that one's kind of traditional fantasy setting in a lot of ways, but then there's this slightly off element to it,
Okay.
Most of my fantasy's weirder than that, though, if you can believe it.
Weirder than the hell realm and tentacles.
Yes, much weirder actually. But anyway, that's maybe I should do more pimpage on this show for my books because I haven't done that in a long time, and whatever, never mind. But back to you, Kev.
Sure.
It sounds like you've lived quite an interesting life as far as you've done a lot of different jobs. You've got a lot of Yeah, obviously you were telling me before the show you growled in the death metal band, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. But just bringing that up because we both know that, and the listeners might not have noticed. But but what's your favorite experience to draw from when it comes to writing your fiction, your horror?
Yeah, it's a really good question actually. For example, my first novella, the Balance, was like this folk horror novella, and it was set in Eastern Europe, in Poland, because I live in Portugal now. I'm from the UK, but I live in Portugal. I've been here for about 8 years, and before that, I lived in Poland for about 3 years. And so the Balance kind of came about from kind of getting to know about Slavic folklore while I was living there by kind of reading, children's books, because when you're learning a language, reading children's books is really easy, right? And talking to people about the environment and getting to know the environment there and stuff. And actually, the new book, Shadow of the Hidden, started from a real life thing that happened when I lived in Turkey, which was to do with a djinn, or my friend believed it was to do with a djinn. I was like, not convinced, mate. But yeah, it was really weird. He basically got cursed by an old widow, and I was present when it happened, and it was actually really, really disturbing because she was a beggar, and in the culture there, I'm not sure if it's like a wider culture or thing within Middle Eastern culture generally, but certainly where I was, that when widows come around begging, you have to give them bread or cheese or whatever. And but this widow had kept coming to him and asking for ice cream, and he was like, "I'm not giving you ice cream because it's really expensive. It's like a luxury good, so you can bugger off." And this one time, she just started screaming at him. And then she changed from like Turkish to Arabic, and like then she spat at him, and he was like on the floor when she finished, and he was like crying, like properly crying, like big
Wow.
bruising lad. And I was like, what the hell, man? And he said, she's just like put this terrible curse on me and my family, and like summoned like the worst jinn you can summon and this kind of stuff. And I was like, dude, she's like a crazy old lady, don't worry about it. But then the next day, like his ice cream thing, which weighed like 200 plus kilos, had been like unlocked from its place in the shade and vandalized and moved into the center of the sunshine, and all his stock was destroyed.
Oh no.
And he was convinced it was the jinn. And so, I mean, in real life, I was like, mate, it's not the jinn. She probably just got
she got some thugs
like,
to do that for it. Yeah.
exactly right. But so the book basically picks up from that point and goes like, but what if it was a jinn though?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where the book runs from. Yeah.
That's a good story in its own right, but it's fat. I'm sure, but geez, I gotta say that's interesting. It's also interesting to hear the different take on the different cultures' approach to beggars, because it's not. It always, at least on the Risk map, it's pretty close. Turkey and India are pretty close together, but in India, you're not supposed to give anything to the beggars, basically.
Oh, is that right?
Especially you can, but not if they're crippled. Not if they're like in bad. If they have any kind of disability that they were born with, you're not supposed to give them anything.
Wow.
At least the Hindus won't do it.
To that kind of
it's
thing.
the reincarnation idea. It's like it's their karma. At least that seems to be the attitude when I was there.
Okay. Wow. My God.
Prevalently. But it was only. I mean, but like the Hindus wouldn't give you money, but the Muslims and the Buddhists might. So it's this weird like. If you were blind though, you can't get helped. That's kind of brutal.
That is really tough.
Not trying to pass judgment on the whole culture or anything, but it's just that was tough to see sometimes.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I can imagine. God.
Yeah. So, Anyway, that's a bit of a random digression from me. But hey, what else is this show for?
Exactly. We're writers. That's what happens.
It's true. I mean, and honestly, I didn't even get around to asking you. I mean, do you discover your writing? Well, this is not really a good out question, and we're running out of time. But
Sure.
do you do outlines? Is that just quick here?
It's something that I didn't originally. I didn't do outlines at all. I just wrote, but then I found that as I started to write stories with a bigger scope, then I tied myself in knots so many times. I just started to write kind of milestones, now I call them, and like how I get from milestone 1 to milestone 2 is like, can be as meandering as I like, but as long as I get
mystery
there, then it's all good. Yeah, exactly.
I do like that. I like the lamp posts kind of thing. Like, I know we got to get here, but also we start all the way over here.
Exactly. Whichever way we get there, let's
and there's a few other. We've got a few lights in between, maybe. Yeah.
Exactly. And there is that thing that like sounds like a cliche, but there are those times where something happens, you're like, oh, I didn't expect that, and then you have to kind of take a detour. Yeah.
And for me, that happens so often. That's why I kind of stopped outlining. Like, it happens on the sentence level all the time. Like this. Like, wait a minute, this character is actually this. Oh, I just don't know how to plan my characters, and then they do everything. Yeah. And I'm out of it.
Exactly like this. Like, it was like I was literally between two milestones, and then suddenly one of the characters just had this idea, and I was like, oh, okay, yes, let's park that for now. We'll go this way instead. Awesome.
Oh, wonderful. So, Kev Harrison, thank you so much for being on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you.
Oh, it's been great to talk to you as well. And thanks once again. Tell people where they can find your work, and remind people about the new books coming out.
Yeah, sure. So my website is kevharrisonfiction.com. So that's got a lot of updates there. There's also a free novelette there with witches and buried warding animals. That's lots of fun. That's my newsletter. And you can also find me on Twitter as Lisboeta Inglés, which is not very helpful because it's Portuguese, but there we are. But if you find
I've heard worse handles.
There,
yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. So, once again, thank you, Kev. It's been a lot of fun. And, as for this podcast, you can find us at mentalcellarpublications.com, which sounds like it should be, I should write horror, but I don't. It's just my mind is a dark place. So, a cellar. And thanks for listening, everybody. You can find my books on Amazon.com, timniederwriter.com/books. And stay safe out there. happy Halloween next week. So we're keeping the horror theme going, I think. I've definitely had a horror theme going. But it's been going since like the summer, so I have no idea what's going on here. Yeah, throw up the horns, yeah. We're not a video podcast, but you got to do it. You got to throw up the horns. My fingers don't do it right, though. I'm a weird, like, American cattle there, you know. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. Enough of this meandering. See you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
See ya.
That tears it.